know. That countdown was like pausing a whole bunch of times on my side. I don't know if it's my internet, but it's Friday and we're back with another episode of Conversations, the show where we talk about people things, because there are people that work in businesses. There are people who are having relationships with other people and all this good human gooey stuff. I think is where all the fun, intriguing conversations happen. So this is what we're here doing on this show. And welcome if it's your first time joining us. And welcome if it's not your first time joining us either. We're always glad to have everyone join in, and not only join in, because it's great that you guys come here to watch us, but this is a conversation for everyone. So today we're talking about professional identities. And we have Dr. Sarabeth Berk, I'll let her introduce herself in a moment, who is an expert on not just professional identities, but hybrid professional identities. So that's going to come up today. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring back this conversation, because I've had the lovely Sarabeth on the show before. But earlier this week, I was on a webinar from Gallup, and they just released their State of the Workplace report for 2023. And something that was really intriguing to me was that more people are engaged. So to be fair, the engaged numbers are still like 23% of people or something. They're still quite low. But more of us are engaged at work. But also more of us are stressed at work. And so something that, I mean, I hang out with Sarabeth a little bit. So professional identities kind of like goes in the back of my head. But it's something that's been very relevant for me in my journey. And when I thought about those numbers, I was like, I wonder if there's a like professional identities bit here, and maybe a mindset that we're like, oh, engaged work means work hard, work more, and therefore that leads to more stress. So we're going to explore some of those things today. We're going to explore a whole bunch of hybrid professional identity greatness. And so what we would love for you to contribute are, what questions do you have in the realm of professional identity? What has your experience been in the workplace, maybe in a corporate workplace versus being an entrepreneur or in different work environments? What did you feel like your professional identity was? Did you feel like you had one? How tied was it to a job title, or how tied was it to a hierarchical, I can never say that properly, structure in an organization? And these are some of the things that really contribute to how we show up at work. And if we forget that these are experiences that humans are having in the workplace, then we can't really talk about engagement and stress and all of the other symptoms that are outcomes of people at work. So that's a much more detailed intro than I normally do. Usually I'm like, here we are, let's talk about things.
There's a lot on your mind.
But I just love this like interconnectedness, and also why I love the concept of the hybrid professional identity. So before we get into all the conversation, Sarabeth, would you like to just share with everybody why did you end up in professional identities work, and why the hybrid importance?
Totally. Tracy, thank you for having me back. I love that this is such a conversation platform. It's not an interview, and professional identity is totally my jam. So to kick it off a little bit about me, I never expected to become a professional identity researcher. I didn't even know that was a thing. If you Google search it, I think I'm the only person that really shows up, because it's not a field, but I think it needs
personal branding for the win.
Yes, totally. My dream upon dreams would be that someday there is a professional identity development field, and that people are coaching in it and using it for career and professional development and all kinds of reasons, human development. But essentially I got here because I was undergoing my own identity crisis in my work. I have an undergrad degree in art and visual art and studies. I have a master's degree in art education. I have a PhD in curriculum. And then I veered into innovation design and then entrepreneurship. And now I work for a fractional HR company. Like, there is no straight path in my background. And every time people ask me, what do you do? It was an anxiety attack. It was like the question I didn't ever want to answer, because I didn't know how to say who I am. And eventually, and this is what really erupted in my PhD studies, I wanted to get clear on, what am I doing next? Who am I? How do I see myself? And how do I talk about that in a way where the world will understand my mixed up, diverse, jack of all trades background? And so that really led me to dissecting myself, understanding what professional identity is, and hint, it's not your job title. And then becoming more empowered that I get to name and invent and own the language I use about myself, which no one was talking about. I still don't see this in the career field. I think it is so timely and relevant that people understand they have the power to define themselves and all the impact and benefits that can have. And now, just as a side note, I'm taking my work from professional identity and veering into the space of what I'm calling career belonging. So if we want to go in that direction at all today, I'm really so curious and kind of obsessed about what the heck a career is today. That term is overloaded. It doesn't mean what it used to mean. And I think that kind of goes to the Gallup report of why people are so dissatisfied, disengaged, burned out. We're striving for these old definitions of success of what a career is or what a professional identity is supposed to be. And I'm like, I want to just eliminate this old jargon and start fresh with new thinking. So that's kind of a smorgasbord of my background.
And this is great because this is what we love to do on this show is just throw the old ways out the window and talk
Perfect.
about new ways that
Yeah.
maybe things could happen. Also, I think there might have been a StreamYard issue connecting to my LinkedIn account because I got a notice. I think we're live now. So
Okay.
if anybody's watching, can you just pop a comment and be like, I'm seeing you live? Because it says I'm live and it says we've been live for 7 minutes, but I would love to get some kind of confirmation of that. So if you're here and watching us, just let us know. Regardless, we're going to have this conversation because it's being recorded, and if it's not live, we'll get it out to you.
I know. I've been there before.
Technology. What are you going to do? Okay, so Sarabeth, I do want to talk about this concept of like how does the concept of professional identities play into engagement and stress levels. But in this environment, we're also dealing with a lot of people who have been laid off. Shall we say a job market that's in turmoil? So some of the hiring practices that used to work before COVID aren't working for people. A lot of individual employees are looking for more meaningful work, more I guess maybe I feel like it's just like being seen as a human instead of a number. And so for anybody who might be listening who's in that job search right now, what are some things that maybe some questions they can ask themselves that can just call to the forefront what they might be thinking about themselves in terms of a professional identity?
Such a good question, because these transitions happen all the time. And even if it feels like your first major one you're going through, it's likely you're going to go through another. So I think these are tools people just need to be good at life. I think the immediate thing people do when they're on the job hunt is they're like, how do I clean up my LinkedIn and improve my resume and polish my interviewing skills? But the question I'd say comes before all of that is, who are you? How do you see yourself in your work? Your professional identity is what you call yourself in your work, and it's not the prior job titles you've had. The issue with job titles is they're so generic. You can use one title across 20 different companies and they all kind of mean variations of things. There's no like one size fits all, but they're a category. And so until you have sat and reflected on like, what does my job history mean to me? How do I explain these 7 different positions I've held? Or maybe it was 1 or 2 for a long period of time and now you're switching gears. You have to be ready to explain who you are. And then the next part is, why do you define yourself that way? What does it mean? So I'll give an example. I've come to my own professional identity that I'm a creative disruptor. It's something that I've held inside of me for 20 years, but I only named it 5, 6 years ago because I didn't know how to name myself. And my job titles prior were art educator and program director, and now I'm a chief of staff. Like, they're very generic. So knowing that I've been a creative disruptor across all of this work history has helped me connect the dots and then explain, here's why being a creative disruptor matters in the past, as well as in the present and future to whatever company or team I'm working with. It's my secret sauce, right? So those would be the cornerstones of questions. And then once I can see being a creative disruptor is who I am. I know those are my values. I know that's what I stand for. It's what I need in my work to make me feel fulfilled and lit up and excited. And if I have to leave the creative disruptor side of me to the side or push it away because an employer is like, we need you to be more of, a data analyst and this kind of work, I'm going to burn out in that job because the part of me that matters won't be there. So it's helping me advocate for myself in future interviews or in writing cover letters, pretty much any interaction when I'm networking and looking for a job. And last thing is the key words, right? I know a certain set of words that I'm looking for in jobs. Now, there's always synonyms and ways people say it differently, but it's the cornerstones that I'm looking for that help me find what I'm calling more career belonging as opposed to career fit. So that would be a little bit of the roadmap for anyone on the job market right now.
Yeah. And I think you gave a great example of yours. And one of the things, so Sarabeth challenged me historically to do this exercise as well. And something that came up for me was human potential optimizer. And it was like,
love it.
The coolest thing for me was that like, I had this moment of, yes, this is what I'm about. And whether I've been a basketball coach or whether I have been a mom or whether I have been a leader in a corporate work environment or just a sales and marketing individual contributor, I've always been about optimizing the humans. Like, what is this person doing here? Just like buried under a newspaper. Literally, I worked in the days of newspapers, newspapers all day, right? Like trying to find competitors' ads. Which is like, who are you? Like, what do you want to do with your life? And these are things that I'm innately curious about, and not all people are curious about. And so it's really cool to, I would say, connect with Sarabeth, and she'll give you some really good prompt questions to figure out what your words might be. Sure. But when you go into this, it's not, again, like Sarabeth said, it's not that you can't be a creative disruptor and be a chief of staff and be a researcher or and. It's about saying, how can I be a human potential optimizer as a data analyst? Right. Who says I can't?
It's the intersection, Tracy. Like that's what we're going back to is I talk about intersectionality all the time. If you are an and person, I'm this, I wear a lot of hats. Cool. But how do they connect? What is the key overlap that really shows why you are all of that?
And it's fun to be, I think that there's a huge amount of confidence tied into this, because if I'm thinking about how I'm going to write a cover letter or how I'm going to show up in an interview, and I know someone also described me as a tornado of creation. And I was like, oh, I love that so much. And so now I look at opportunities from like, are you inviting in a tornado of creation?
Right.
Or are you like looking for someone to write content?
Yes.
Because me and that person are not the same person. And maybe let me make some introductions to people who might be a good fit for that. But knowing those things about yourself allows you to show up, especially at an interview. I saw a post yesterday about how to, like, some things you can do to prepare yourself for interviews. And one of them is like to interview the company like you're in this is a two-way deal here, right? Like I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me. I want to find out if I want to work here and if you will accept that I'm a tornado of creation.
Very much. I love that.
It's just so empowering then to say, and even if you're then in the scenario, like I need a job today, so I'm going to take the first opportunity that comes to me. There's still two opportunities. One, you make a conscious decision to make that trade. Right. So I know this is my professional identity. I know I'm making this trade for the short term because I need to financially. This is my long-term goal to get out of that. And you can plan around that. Or let's say because we're talking about intersectionality.
Yeah, totally.
And you can go into that role, say it's data analysis, or I always say like, go get a job being a call center agent. Right? Like everyone always needs a call center agent. Most of them are remote nowadays. If you're doing that, how can you bring a creative disruptor energy or a human potential optimizer energy in your call center work. I literally used to work for a call center, and I quit working there because they didn't like my human potential optimizer vibe. They're like, just give people phone numbers. And I was like, no, I can't do that. There was this like lovely, and you could tell this back in the days where we didn't have video chat and people called like 411 to find out phone numbers. And I feel like I'm dating myself. I'm really not that old. This is how fast technology.
Newspapers and call centers.
I know. Calling 411 for phone numbers. What is that? The Gen Zers are like, who are you? But like, there was this lovely gentleman who called in, and you could tell he just needed somebody to talk to. So I talked to him, and then I got in trouble because I talked to him, and it like, well, like your average call time is supposed to be this amount of, and I was like way over it, right? And literally, I was like 2 or 3 minutes. It's not like I talked to him for like an hour. But I was like, in that moment, I was like, this, I can't work here, right? Like this place isn't for me. And it's not that call centers in general are bad or couldn't support that, but this job, this specific role can't. And I worked 3 shifts. And I was like, I quit. And these are the things where you can like, again, when you find those pieces of you and you can like put the puzzle pieces together, like, oh, that's why that thing in that past job drove me nuts so much. Okay, now you have a good foundation to go and find your next thing.
Yeah, you need the contrast to reflect on who you are. You need to see how you are in different situations, which is why we get experiences of our lifetime to be like, I want more of this and less of that. This feels more me. This isn't me. And the key words here that I hold on to are, do you feel seen, known, and valued? At the end of the day, that's how I'm starting to measure what my career is about. It's not about these other metrics of how much money am I making? What's my job title? What's the brand name of the company? The status, like all those external measures. Maybe in your 20s and 30s, you're searching for because you think that's what you're supposed to do. But eventually you're like, that's not fulfilling. Like just because I attained this certain thing. So I love that you're matching up knowing your human potential optimizer and then seeing in 1,000 different situations, it can apply. But if on the other side, they don't value it or know you for it, it's never going to be the right connection.
Yeah. And that's such an important point too, because I would say in my past work experience, it's not that I didn't feel seen and appreciated as a resource in the organization, but I wasn't seen and appreciated for the things that mattered to me.
Yes, that is the whole ticket right there. You said it.
Because it's nice. I say like my past boss, love her, right? Lovely human. And she had this innate ability to like know when people were questioning whether or not they wanted to stay with the organization and gave you a promotion. Right. I'm like, there is a skill associated with that, but it would have been more meaningful to me if someone had just said, hey, I see what you're doing with your team. I see how much your people love working here. I see how much your people love working for you. I see how many of your people have gone on to things much greater than where we are. And like, I celebrate you for that. And I would have been like, oh, thank you. This is what I came to do. Someone saw it. And so again, these are the things when I think when we use the language of seen, heard, valued,
valued.
Right? Like, I'm getting paid. I'm valued.
Like
put it to the test a little more.
There's different layers of this. Like this is where we're starting into the nitty gritty. I'm very clear. I'm defining it as being seen, known, and valued for who you are, for how you see yourself in your work, which is your professional identity. There are many other layers of being seen, known, and valued, but that doesn't mean they map to what's important to you and what you're trying to put out there. And that can be where things start to fall apart. And I want to echo something before we shift gears. The value of this, knowing you're a human potential optimizer and I'm a creative disruptor, is I can lead with that in interview conversations before I'm even with a company. And so, quick example, I worked with this guy named Scott, and he realized he was a tension methodologist, and his traditional job title had been like project manager. And so he was going up for an interview, and during the interview, they said, tell us about yourself, the quintessential question. And he used my framework and was like, well, I actually see myself as a tension methodologist. When I'm doing project management, I'm balancing here and I'm shifting this. And he explained it. And everyone, he said, started nodding their head. It was like a group, he was being interviewed by multiple people of the company. And they reflected back to him and said, oh my gosh, we need attention methodologists. Like that's exactly what we're looking for. So him having the language about his self and his skills and his why helped the company see him, right? And it echoed back. And then if he decided to go forward, it would have helped him carry that conversation into his day-to-day jobs, to his performance reviews. Like it just expands. So you get to be you in the role.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that this is equally relevant for entrepreneurs who are looking for clients, would you say?
Oh, God, yes. Because entrepreneurs like are known for just calling themselves entrepreneurs. I'm the founder CEO. Well, millions of people have that identity. Great.
I think this is, I mean, I do a lot of work with people on messaging and their brand presence on LinkedIn and things like that. And it's always so interesting for me. I was actually auditing a website yesterday and my feedback was like, honestly, I just feel like I've heard this before, right? Yes. Like, I feel like I read this all the time. It's like, what is different? And there's so much of that comes from the people, right? Yes. So lots of us are doing the same type of work, right? Yeah. I always say, like, if you go and look at personal branding coaches on LinkedIn, there's a whole bunch
millions.
Yeah. But there's people who have agencies. There's people who do it this way. I get into this big LinkedIn fight with a company who this ad I saw, and they're trying to promote, we can help CEOs create all of their monthly personal branding content in 1.5 hours a month. And I was like,
that's scary.
Can we go back to the basic question here? Why are you building a personal brand? And if you don't want to build it, then is it a personal brand? Anyway, that's a conversation for another show. But like, there's lots of people doing lots of things in the personal branding arena. I do personal branding because I'm a human potential optimizer. How does this relate to personal branding? Let me tell you.
And listen to how different that sounds already. You already differentiated yourself in just like 10 words. Right. And I tell people all the time, skills are different than identities because we conflate them. So personal branding people are, working on copywriting and imagery and blah, blah, blah. But just because you're doing that, well, someone else might call themselves a graphic designer or someone else might be an illustrator. Like the identity of the person can be different, even if the skills sound the same. So that's why it's also misleading.
Yeah. And I think too, maybe historically, those types of skills, even when I think about resumes and things, those are the types of things people are used to showing up and showing, right? These are my skills. People are looking for my skills. I have to tell you my skills. Yes. Although I always tell people, like, I'm useless at graphic design. So if you're coming here for graphic design, I'm not your gal. But these are, and even in that, right? Like I remember being in corporate, like I was in corporate marketing for 15 years. There were lots of people who tried to get me to learn design skills. And I was always like, I just don't like it. I don't see it. Like graphic designers see things in colors and combinations. And I don't see that way. Right? Like, I can't learn to be like that. Let's let those people be like that and let me be like me, because there aren't very many people that I've come across anyway that want to be human potential optimizers. Want to focus on human challenges and be like, what's the people problem here? And how can we fix it? Not just like, let's get rid of these people, they're a problem, but like, there's always things we can do to ignite people's fire. And like, I would like to do those things. And there's lots of people who don't want to do those things. And that's fine too. This is why we have accountants, not just all accountants. I love you, accountants. If I didn't have an accountant, I'd be useless. Balance. We all have our professional identities. And if we can end up in the right place, it's helpful. Okay, so I thought of one other thing I want to talk about before we go into engagement and stress stuff. And we will get there, I promise. I want to just kind of flip this for a moment from a leadership perspective, in like the power of knowing the professional identities of the people that you're working for, because you touched on that in the interview process. So as a leader, one, where can this relationship break if you aren't familiar with your own professional identity? And two, how can you create space for professional identities instead of skills to thrive in a workplace?
Okay, let me see how well I can unpack that. Keep me on track if I don't answer perfectly. You're making me think of a couple things. One is that leaders and companies are looking for a certain set of like, here's a job description, here's what we need done, but they're not understanding so in my framework, there are 3 types of professional identity. People fall under singularity, multiplicity, or hybridity. So as a leader or employer, you need to be clear which type of professional identity you need in that role. And the way those 3 types map is essentially like this. If you have singularity, you are more of an expert. There is one thing you want to focus on. I feel like a lot of engineers fall into this, people in medical professions, they're like, I just want to stay in my lane and do the work. Don't stretch me, right? Then the next bucket, multiplicity, are more of your generalists or people that wear a lot of hats or multi-potentialites, multi-passionate. They're like, I can do this and this and this and this. And so they can be very wide and incorporative. But the third bucket, the hybridity, is people that can see in between. They are the cross-functional, intersectional, they're really the integrators of a company. So like a biz dev ops leader or someone who's there to help do change management or process improvement. And they have to talk to 5 different areas of the company or internal and external stakeholders because they're the chrysalis. So what kind of person do you need? What is this role targeting? And if you're not clear, then you won't get the right identity fit, right? So that's part of this from a leadership point of view. And then I think you asked about the skills. This could be a really long conversation because we are in a trend where competency-based hiring is getting really big, and it doesn't matter about, people's past titles. It's more about like, can you do the job? Here are the skills we need. I think it still comes back to identity because a bunch of skills, like mathematically, could add up and equal different types of roles, essentially. So if you're like, I need someone who can do research and writing and photography and this, well, that could be in a marketing role, or that could be in a research role, or that could be in the data department. Like, it's still about how do you see yourself? Mm-hmm. And so I want employers to start asking more of those questions of like, tell us how you see yourself, not just tell us what you can do. Mm-hmm. And I believe because of how organizations are created, they have to have a hierarchy, they have to have job titles, but the double intro is sort of this thing that I'm pushing and advocating for, where you can say, like, I'm Sarabeth, I'm the chief of staff at this company, but I call myself a creative disruptor, even though I'm in that formal job title. And the two can play together. It's what the company wants you to call yourself, plus the identity you see yourself as. And that's where things start to get interesting, as well as the value starts to show up. Right. So that's a little where my brain goes with that question.
Yeah. Well, and this is like, it kind of just brings me back to this concept of who says you can't be a creative disruptor as a chief of staff.
Right.
But I mean, in terms of the hiring process, it's important for both you as the hiree and the company to know, like, I'm hiring a creative disruptor for this. Yeah. Am I fine with that? Because it could be a tornado of creation. I'm fine with that.
And actually, a funny point, the job title wasn't even really on the table when I took the job with Talented Team. We loosely talked about like 3 different job titles, but they were more interested in me and what I saw myself as. And they're like, okay, let's figure out what to name that in the company. Now, granted, it's a smaller business, but still, that's the opportunity there, is like letting go of labels helps you optimize the person.
Mm-hmm. And I think to like see more of the person, right? Like if I look at myself, I look at my resume, right? And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of VP of marketing and marketing this and that. And I'm like, that's good. And honestly, I do identify as a marketer, but I wouldn't choose like marketer over human potential optimizer. Like I'm not good. I actually had a conversation with someone recently who was like, you'd be great. You can come and do all of our marketing for us. And I'm like, no, I would not be great for that. Because can I? Yes. Will I like it? No. And it's something, even as an entrepreneur, that's been really interesting for me to explore, because had I met you when I was in my corporate career, that might have looked different. But I only knew the like corporate marketing version of myself when I started my own business. And there were so many pieces of it that were disconnected. And honestly, it probably took me like 2.5 years to figure out, like, and thanks to you and some other people, Kira Day, I will also give a shout out to at the Passion Center, helped me tons in this arena. But figuring out that, like, this is what I'm about, and I care about authenticities, and I care about marketing. I know how to do that, right? So I can help people bring their real self to the people on LinkedIn, and like, so that's what I can do. But this is why I do it, because you deserve to hear your voice heard, and you deserve not to be a cookie. I mean, cookies are delicious, but like, they're for snacking. They're not for selling services.
Yeah, it's your truth. At the end of the day, it's revealing your truth, and you're not a sheep, and you're not like everybody else. Like, we are individuals. How do you celebrate your individuality in your work? We all have different first names and last names. That's how I know who you are versus me. So why don't we have different professional identities? Because we're all unique.
Oh, so good. Okay, let's bring it back to this engagement piece, because I do think, kind of like what we're talking around, people might be saying, oh, I can kind of hear how this is related to engagement. So like, as somebody who is in a role that I have clarity on my professional identity as myself, and I'm working in a place where those people appreciate and show me that they appreciate my professional identity, how does that play into engagement?
Sure. Is that the question? How does that play into engagement? Okay. You were laughing and I was like, oh, there's more. Oh,
well, there will be more, but let's go with that for now.
Okay. So this, I think, is leading me into my current research, and I'm still forming a lot of thoughts, but it's getting clearer. So when I first began this work over a decade ago, it was about, who am I in my work? How do I answer what I do? Now I have that answer. I've got a professional identity, and I know why I define it the way I do. But then the question that comes after that, which I started hearing from clients, is, well, where do I fit? Like, what kind of job do I take or career do I have if I'm X professional identity? And I was like, well, you can, I had some little answer, but I realized that's not the answer. Like, the answer is bigger. There's something else going on here. And that's when I started looking at terms that we use, like follow a career path, or what's your career fit, or, what are the metrics of success for careers? And I was like, none of this is what's happening anymore. Like, these aren't the things people say they want. They're going along with the flow because we use this language all the time, but yet they're living a different experience. So most people I know are not on a career path. That idea is just gone. Most people are not looking to fit in. Like, everybody says, I don't want to fit in a box. I don't want to be pigeonholed. Oh, but I want my job fit. And it's like, that's a paradox. So I think this engagement answer, and it's for a segment of workers, right, who want to feel fulfilled, who are looking for purpose in their work, who realize that career span is more than 40 years of our life now. Like, you're going to have multiple opportunities and experiences. You don't have to choose one thing for 40 or 60 years. So it's very natural that things are going to evolve and change. So if you fall into that bucket of, my job and work is more than just going and paying the bills and rising to some level on a ladder, then you're in this other bucket that I think is about finding your career belonging. And as I mentioned, belonging is a really big word. Identity is also a really big word. So when I look at belonging, you can belong to a job, you can belong to a company, you can belong to a team, you can belong to many different things. But one of these items is, your career can belong to you. And that's a message I don't think we're sharing enough out there, that no one can take your career. No one tells you what your career is. It is all the internal introspective work of, how do I want to feel when I do work? What do I value when I do work? Who am I in my work? That's all the different parts of career belonging. So I believe, to solve these issues of engagement and satisfaction and better performance and retention and all the issues Gallups and the McKinseys of the world are reporting on, it actually comes back to the individual not knowing themselves, and the employer not supporting enough career development or professional development opportunities to say, what does your career mean to you? What are the values you need? And how does that connect back to who you are? How can we support you with that within our team, our company, or whatever circumstance? I will tell you right now, most individuals have never been asked these questions. They don't have these answers. They don't even know what you're talking about, because they're like, wait, I thought my employer is responsible for helping me get the promotion or making that lateral move, or I have to navigate through these paths. And it's like, that's all external thinking. So this is where I want to start with people, is start inside yourself. The answers are inside. And if you're trying to use assessments like StrengthsFinders and Myers-Briggs and DISC, those are cool, but they don't give you the unique perspective that's inside of you because they're all quantified labels that you end up with as a result. So I think that's where we need to go, Tracy. That's on my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I love the authenticity piece of that, right? Because we're really saying, and like, I generally hate personality assessments. And while I think that I've taken the Clifton Strengths, I think it's good. It was like pretty accurate, right? Like, it's a great reminder of these are things that I do actually, one, I'm good at, but also that I like. And I feel like partially I'm good at because I like them. So I like keep investing in my skills in those arenas. Versus like learning how to do graphic design. But I always think like you can identify with something or you cannot identify with something. Right. I always use the Harry Potter sorting hat. I wish I had my Harry Potter cup today, but I have R2-D2 today.
That's so good.
But I was like I can identify as a Gryffindor or a Slytherin and I actually have, fun fact for those of you who don't know this about me, I actually have Gryffindor house socks.
That's awesome.
Well, I have all the Hogwarts houses. So some days I'm like, I'm feeling kind of Slytherin today.
Right.
I think I need to be like I need to be maybe clever. So I'm going to wear my Slytherin socks.
I love it.
This is taking that like external validation piece and someone else telling you who you are and saying like, okay, that's the identities. Jay, you're right. I am actually I'm totally
Oh, he went there.
Jay knows me. I appreciate it. Also, I'm pretty sure we're not streaming live on LinkedIn because that is a comment from Facebook. So I'll keep
there we go.
To everybody. But these are you get to choose, right? I get to choose. I want to feel clever today. I'm going to wear these socks. I want to feel brave today. I'm going to wear Gryffindor. I want to feel like friendshipy. I'm going to wear my Hufflepuff socks. And there's like a fun, but also an ownership in that. Like I'm choosing it. I choose my professional identity. If someone else can't tell me I'm a ING, I don't know what that one is. People always reference it to me and I'm like, I don't know, an introvert, extrovert, something.
Oh yeah.
J's.
One of those.
I don't know what J's are. But people put a lot of stock into these things that other people tell you. And sometimes it's interesting. Right?
Oh, totally.
My coach loves human design and she'll tell me things and I'm like, that seems accurate. Manifesting generator, that aligns with human potential optimizer. But it's just like, I choose it. I choose to create the connection or I choose to not create the connection and be like, oh, no, that one doesn't really feel like me, but this one I do. And that's the ownership piece of it. So let's talk about this ownership of our professional identities in the stress conversation, because in the Gallup report, one of the things they were talking about is that there's lots of external stress factors. So the workplace can be a stress factor, but in our post-COVID environment, there's many other stress factors as well. And one of the kind of reasonings that they gave in the like mismatch between like engagement is going up but stress is also going up is that the stress is coming from not the workplace. So people are feeling more engaged at work. And I was like, maybe. But I think it's also possible that that stress, like I mentioned at the beginning, is coming from, we think, or our definition of engaged work is that I work more, I work harder, I get the promotion, and therefore I'm more stressed out because I'm putting that, carrying that weight myself. And so from a professional identities perspective, how does owning your professional identity play in with our ability to handle, let's start with just with work stress.
Oh my goodness. So many things to talk about on this one. Literally just last week, for the first time ever, I always have like Google alerts and I forget what exact setting popped up, but I saw my first academic, it was a journal article looking at the professional identity measurement of emergency medical professionals. I've never seen a quantitative instrument to help people measure themselves in their work. And essentially, I need to dive into the report a bit more. So I'm trying to think very high level what I took away. They really saw that if the medical professionals felt seen and connected to the work, they performed better. They were just more connected to why they were there, and why they had allegiance and loyalty and trust and all of those things. And so there is a correlation between knowing yourself, feeling your identity is being represented, and why you do what you do. The stress factor, I mean, that's a wicked complex question, right? Because there's so much going on outside of our lives that affects our work lives. And my partner believes there's a quote about, a true master, you can't tell the difference between work and play. Like they're so well designed in your life that it just looks like you're doing both. And I think that's what we strive for. And to me, when you're playing, you're not stressed. You're in that state of flow and effortlessness, and it's like juicy and you don't want to leave it. But we all know that's not a permanent state. It's a state we get maybe a few minutes a day, or we can build into a few hours a day. But there's a lot of factors trying to take us out of that. So I don't have a perfect answer to this idea of stress, but I do really think it comes back to allowing your career being a constellation of experiences. Stop shaping things as I worked at this company and then did this job and then did this. Like all this linearity and very formal measurements and structures to assess ourselves, it just it isn't representative of us. And so if we think a career is 60 or 80 years of our life, well, what are all the moments and events and experiences you've had along the way, not just jobs? Because I'll have like a moment within a job that was like my favorite time I worked at that company, or the best project I ever did. That's how I'm going to remember what makes my career, and make me feel less stressed out about the day-to-day work. So I'm hoping people can embrace more of that. Just one other side note, I'm thinking more about career as our body of work or our oeuvre. Like a painter like Picasso, well, he was an artist, so he did paintings and sculpture and printmaking, and he would have a period that was his blue period and then his cubist period. And, it would change over time, but we still knew he was an artist at heart, and he had all these moments that fluctuated. I don't know if that, again, solves the stress part of this, but I think it's just breaking old mental models is step one that we're in right now, and rethinking what work is, what careers are, and who you are. And then maybe stress will also start to shift with all of that. What do you think?
Yeah. It's funny because I had a friend a while ago challenge me to tell a story on my LinkedIn profile. And he was like, you're a storyteller, but your LinkedIn profile is like a resume. So like, why don't you tell a story? And I was like, ooh, what story would I do? And so I actually went, and I'll be honest with anybody who's watching this, who's like, this sounds like a great idea. It probably took me like a solid 8 hours to do the rewrite. So it's not like a 5-minute activity.
No.
I went through my entire work history, and I even added jobs and roles that weren't on my LinkedIn profile before, because I got excited about the career story it was telling. So like from my first, when I was 15, I was a party planner, right? And I could twist balloon animals, can still twist balloon animals, and paint faces and watch kids bounce in bouncy castles and things like that. And what I did with each of my jobs was I talked about a story that was the most meaningful for me.
Wow. Yeah.
And some of it was just cool to look at, like the patterns that emerged, because then I was like, I worked as a direct marketing coordinator.
Sure.
You might know what that is. The number one thing I took away from that job is that my company let me create a passport to fitness program. And I ran this like lunchtime workout program for the corporate office. And it wasn't related to my job at all, but I learned about all the people, and some people were like, oh yeah, I'm also a yoga instructor on the side. And I'm like, oh yeah, you could come in and teach yoga at lunch. And I'm a dancer, so I did dance class, and we did like strength training, and sometimes we would do walks, but every day at lunch we had fitness, and I made a little passport, and every time you came, you got a stamp, and whoever had the most stamps at the end of the month got a thing. Like HR gave me $100 budget or whatever to like give people water bottles and towels and stuff. And it was like one, I created it from scratch, so
Yeah.
that was fun. Two, it was something that's meaningful to me. I get like movement and activities and something that's important. Two, I got to learn about people at my work, like learn things about them I never knew, right? And like it hit on all of my passion drivers, which I didn't know at the time. But when I went back and told those stories, I was like, oh, like, why is that so meaningful to me?
Yeah.
And you can start to look at like, oh yeah, that was so meaningful. Or, oh, it was so meaningful for me when my first employee quit to take a job that was like exactly in alignment with what they wanted to do with their life. And I was like, yes, good job, you. These are kind of the patterns when you can get into that storytelling methodology with your career that I think are kind of fun. And one of the other things that came up for me was that someone asked me this yesterday, if you could describe your career in a shape, what would it look like? And he was telling me like all of these shapes that people had chosen.
Shapes. Yeah.
And I was like, mine would be Mr. Messy. Remember Mr. Messy?
No, like, I don't know Mr. Messy.
So there was like this whole series of books that were Mr. This and Mrs. This. And anyway, there's Mr. Messy.
Oh, yeah, the Misters. Yeah. Okay.
And he's just like this squirrely, squiggly line.
Okay.
And I'm like, yes, because sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down and sometimes it's around, but it's like me, right? And I can look at it and be like, yes. And did I always know where I was going? No, but that's not the point.
Tracy, I love this because this echoes this philosophy, this theory I have that the achievement I think a lot of us are striving for and don't realize is getting to flight, like taking off. Because flight to me is shapeless. You can go in all directions. It's omnidirectional. There is no path. You are in the air, feeling what you feel, soaring, gliding, tumbling, going up, going down. But it's limitless. It's freedom. It's the ultimate expression of you follow you. No one can tell you where to go and when. That to me is my aspiration, but I think my past has been much more of like a labyrinth. Like I've been trying to work through the puzzle and get through the right door and find the right direction. And I turned left when I should have turned right. And there was a dead end, and it's just been anxiety and stress and all that. And then when I thought about the idea of flight, because I'm in this whole new space where my career is nothing that I imagined it to be. I could have never predicted anything that happened in the last 3 to 5 years with COVID. And now I'm in a space of releasing the expectations, the shoulds, the I needed to do whatever. And I'm like, I'm flying, I'm soaring. I don't know where I'm going, but does that matter? I'm tied and connected to my values. I'm having great experiences. I'm meeting fantastic people. That's actually more what I want my career to be about. So I'm there now.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, like we've had lots of conversations together, and this is like a new idea. And to me, I'm imagining, like I have a 5-year-old. And so when I think about like what I would wish for his career versus what I had in my career, not that I regret anything in my career, but it's interesting to look at this and change the definition of achievement, right?
Yes.
In like what we're looking to achieve here isn't a title. It isn't a dedicated parking space. It's not a specific
corner
salary.
office. Yeah.
Right. I was listening, like I saw a LinkedIn post the other day. I was like, I drove by actually a corner office the other day, and I was like, so like open to everyone like that. I wouldn't want that. We're like programmed, especially I went to business school, and it's like you're programmed to want that. And I'm like, if I can just help him switch that narrative and be like, okay, society may still say these things, but what if achievement was about finding your way to fly? Also, I have this like secret wish that he becomes an astronaut, which kind of aligns nicely.
Perfectly.
I've made him a deal that if he ever goes to space and gets to take a +1, that I'm going.
Set him up young.
Yeah. So, okay. So before we finish, Jay had this question. When we were talking about personality testing, but would you say that much of the personality testing and job descriptions amount to oversimplifying what we do? And I kind of want to answer that, but I also want to kind of play that off. Like we've been talking about creative disruptor, human potential optimizer. Yeah. There's also an innate simplicity in that. So like, how does oversimplicity become a danger, but also what is the power in like an actual aligned simplicity?
Great question. Thank you, Jay. I mean, first, it's made me think of this model called optimal distinctiveness, where you fit in and stand out simultaneously. You're in that sweet spot in between. It's really hard to figure that out. And that's, I think, part of what you and I do with people is tweak, okay, you're too far general, you're too far niche, like what's in the middle. But job descriptions and the whole hiring process, I mean, I'm a disruptor, so I want to blow it all up, but I don't have the answer of how to put it back together. We need to have processes. We're using algorithms and AI and all this matching and applicant tracking software. And I know there's a point to it. At some level, just getting your foot in the door, if you're following the traditional, I'm doing the application and all the paperwork steps, it is a keyword matching system. It just has to be. That's how computers are designed. It's binary, zeros and ones. But once you get to the human step, now we're in a different ballgame. Now it's about conversation, storytelling, nuance, defining the language you're using certain words because they mean certain things. So I think keywords are sort of the beginning of the traditional application process and job description process. Although I would like to see job descriptions be more clear on this is a role where we need someone with expertise or singularity. This is a role where we need someone with multiplicity. You can do a lot of things. This is a role where we need hybridity because it's at the intersection of, actually that phrase at the intersection of, I can find in real job descriptions and people's profiles, because it's the way to say I'm in a space in between, even if you don't have a name for it. And that's where I feel like 90% of things fall, is this new space without a name. So that would be my stepping stone, Jay, is getting us at least to be clear in job descriptions about the type of professional identity or the intersections that role is positioned at. But all the heavy lifting is going to be once you get to the interview or the personal level. That's what I see so far.
Yeah. And I think too, it's tricky from our typical job description, because again, this becomes very task-based, very skill-based.
Oh, yeah.
And so we simplify the human down to, you can do these tasks.
Yeah.
And I always say, and I don't know why I've decided this is my example, but I could shuck corn. It could be my job. Actually, depending on who I'm shucking corn for, it might be fun. But I could do that. Actually, this is probably a better example. I could be a chauffeur. I could drive, or a taxi driver. I can drive. I have a license. I actually hate driving though. So it's not a good job for who I am.
Right.
It's not that I can't do the thing. It's not a good job for who I am. And when we look at a lot of job descriptions, and even throughout the hiring process, people are looking for things that you do.
I know.
And we're not looking at who people are. And this is a two-way conversation, because if a company is looking for who I am and I don't know who I am, then that's not going to work either. This isn't just companies doing things. This is people doing things.
And the higher level the work, the harder this gets. I want to get back to that of when you're at the executive or senior levels, it's complex work. It's abstract thinking. You're doing strategy. Well, what the heck does strategy mean? I had a debate with someone who's working at some lab at Harvard, and they're looking at, breaking down every role and job into competencies. I was like, how do you actually measure and talk about the competencies within someone who's a strategic designer or a change management expert? Because that's so complex. It's not just skills based anymore. It's yes, we can measure it. I'm like, but really? So I think we've got a ways to go. I think some people think they figured it out, but I don't believe we really have. And someone prove me wrong. I'd love to see the examples.
Yeah. And you know what this is making me think too? I'm going to make this our last point, because we literally could talk about this all day. Is that there's this inherent, because of the hierarchy structure, that young people do the doing work, and older people do the strategic work, because you know enough now to do the thinking. But it's interesting for me. So my number one Clifton strength is strategic. And it makes me think about I started coaching basketball when I was 15. I helped people and it was for the junior girls basketball team at my junior high. And so it was these kids are just learning who they are as a player, right? I don't know. And you might grow still. I don't know. You might be super tall. You might be super short. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. But there was a development process that was okay, we're building this team. This is what we have. This is who we need in this position. This is who we need in terms of backups, right? And when I look back, like I've always been a strategic thinker. I've been the one who like didn't want to do specific projects at school because I'm like, well, you're just telling me what to do. What's the fun in that, right? Like if I'm going to make a board game, I'm like my own board game. I don't want to make Monopoly, right? Like it already exists. And so I just wanted to ask you, Sarah, because I participated in your focus group and there were a bunch of age demographics in there too. And like, what do you think in terms of these professional identities in terms of owning that I'm a young person and I'm a strategic thinker, and this is where I thrive instead of like working my way up through the ranks?
So good. Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief because this is a big question. I say I work at the intersection as a professional identity researcher. I'm combining human development with professional identity studies and personal branding and career development. So that's a really unique way to cross these fields, because what you're veering into in that question for me is development. We think we understand the world in our 20s, and we do to a degree, but we also don't know what we don't know. And then another decade passes and now we realize, oh, in my 20s, I didn't see this. So I've got a new level of consciousness. So I've met 20-year-olds because I've worked on college campuses and I've hired college students. They are very strategic, but they also have a limit to what their strategic abilities are at that point, and that's normal. And everyone's growth curve is different, right? These things don't just map perfectly to age. You can meet a 40-year-old and a 20-year-old who are actually very similar in their abilities and their thinking style, because maybe the 40-year-old peaked or just doesn't know how to get to the next level of where they're trying to go. And all of that maps to a lot of human development models. So I do think there's something to be said of, if you believe you know yourself and you have a quality, well, then validate it, back it up with evidence, demonstrate that you can do it. And also be aware that you're still going to grow and learn and change as you age. And we're all going to look different. So it's that both and, that push and pull.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the things that I have experienced from the best leaders that I have had, is they see your potential and they give you opportunities to follow that, but they also give you an out in case you're like, okay, like my best manager, the first time I got a leadership opportunity, he said to me, I think you would be great as the team lead. What I would like to do is give you a 6-month team lead opportunity. And this is what it's going to look like. And after the 6 months, if you don't like it, you can go back to being an account manager. And if you do like it, we can go from there. And I was like, oh, this is like pretty much risk-free, right? Like I try it out. If I don't like it, I can have my old job back. So that's great. And I ended up liking it and it changed my career trajectory. But it was an opportunity. And it wasn't like, yeah, okay, like I don't know everything about leadership today. I was like 27 years old. Like, yeah, I've been a leader on my basketball team. I've been a leader on baseball teams. I've coached teams, right? Like, but I've never been a leader in a professional environment. Someone gave me a chance because they saw potential related to my professional identity. And I think this is one of the things that when we look at job descriptions and things like that, we're not necessarily looking for potential in people. We're looking for something I know you can do today. And for somebody who's like looking to go to the next level, I don't want to do more of what I do today. Otherwise I wouldn't be looking to change jobs. I just stay here and do it. So there's, like we do on this show, we have opened a can of worms in terms of
like 20.
20 cans of worms, at least. Where professional identities are relevant. And the point being is that what if we included this concept of professional identities in our conversations, in our engagement conversations, in our hiring conversations, in our interviews, in all the places.
In our LinkedIn.
Literally all the places.
All the places.
and see what we might be able to see anew that we didn't see before.
I love that.
Okay. Sarabeth, where is the best place for people to find you if they'd like to learn more about your work and professional identities?
So my whole website is called morethanmytitle.com. I have a book of the same name, More Than My Title. It's about professional identity and hybrid professional identity. And I'm working on my next book about career belonging. So find me on LinkedIn or follow me on my website. And I have a lot of freebies there. So go dig around and download whatever you want.
Yes. And if you can't find it, I don't think we're streaming live to LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn, Sarabeth is tagged in the post
Perfect.
for this
Thank you.
event. So you can just click on her name and find the website there. Sarabeth, it is always my great privilege to have you in conversation on this show. I always literally we could talk all day.
Yeah,
and I
this
would
was
just, pick your
fantastic.
brain.
You're great at coming up with questions and prompts too, because you're so inquisitive. So it's really easy. Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. And thank you, Jay, for joining us
Jay.
in the Facebook comments, who moved over to the Facebook because that's where we were streaming live. Technology wasn't our friend today, but we are all friends here in the professional identities conversation. And if you are interested in the conversation, learning more about professional identities, don't make this the last conversation you get in. Connect with Sarabeth, connect with myself, connect with Jay, connect with all the other people who registered for this event. These are the people who are interested in professional identities, and these are the people who you can brainstorm with, explore with, and dare I say, come up with new opportunities in the work environment to incorporate professional identities into our conversations. So thank you all for joining us today, and until next time, permission to do you.
Bye.